2023 has the potential to be one of the most stacked years for gaming ever, yet many upcoming titles have already rubbed a lot of potential customers the wrong way. The games on this list, despite not being out yet, have already hit the wasp's nest of online discourse. So with that being said, I'm Sai for WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 upcoming video games that have already pissed fans off. Number 10. Always online, even when playing solo. Redfall. Easily one of the year's most anticipated Microsoft exclusive titles is open-world multiplayer FPS Redfall, the latest game from Dishonored developers Arcane. And while it's of course a given that you need to connect online for the multiplayer portion of the game, publisher Bethesda stoked the ire of the internet when they recently revealed that the game would require players to remain permanently connected to the internet, even when playing solo. Given that Redfall can be played in its entirety as a single-player experience, forcing players to stay online seems like an excessive measure of control, ensuring that players can't keep playing if they have connection issues or want to go offline for whatever reason. And more to the point, it means that when Redfall's servers are eventually taken offline, the game will effectively become a brick. Simply put, the always online requirement is terrible for game preservation. While publishers typically state that such measures mark an attempt to stamp out piracy, it feels like an especially lousy justification in this case, given that Redfall will be launching on Xbox Game Pass and can be played for just a small subscription fee. Number 9. Loot box nonsense. Skate. As excited as fans were when EA finally confirmed that a new Skate game was in development, they probably should have braced themselves for trouble when EA announced last summer that the game would be free to play. Mere days after the announcement, playtesters leaked the presence of loot box mechanics in the game, with so-called swag bag seeming to suggest that this would be a monetized mechanic to justify the free-to-play model. Given that EA already declared that Skate would feature no paid loot box content, many hoped that it was simply an old feature retained within the playbuild's code. But this past January, interviews with playtesters not only suggested that the game does indeed contain loot boxes, but that EA intends to eventually make them paid. It's perhaps more likely that EA will be technically correct, but still end up tying loot boxes to monetization in some fashion. Either way, the muddy waters have left many hardcore Skate fans skeptical about this otherwise long-awaited title. Number 8. Why So White? Final Fantasy XVI. Production on the upcoming Final Fantasy XVI seems to have gone shockingly smoothly for the standards of the franchise, enough that it's set to release incredibly soon, this coming June in fact. Where did that come from? But there has been considerable fan pushback against the game's blatant lack of diversity among its cast, with there scarcely being any black or in fact any at all non-white characters among the residents of the game's universe. The game's producer, Naoki Yoshida, was quizzed on this by IGN late last year and gave a response that proved quite dissatisfactory with the fanbase indeed. Essentially, his excuse was that there was a narrative boundary that they'd set for themselves and that this fantasy game was being rooted somewhat in reality. Now, ignoring for a moment there the fact that there was non-white people in medieval Europe, which this game is clearly based on, medieval Europe didn't have kingdoms of people with giant kaiju summon beasts to do battle for them. Final Fantasy XVI is a highly fantastical and unrealistic game filled with ridiculous creatures and magical abilities, but apparently we draw the line at ethnic diversity. Number 7. Live Service Overload. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Excitement definitely at least existed on the lead up to Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, but it's hard to imagine such a thing considering the verbal battering the game got immediately on reveal. With famed developers Rocksteady behind the title, who had massively worked on the Arkham series, and a name like Kill the Justice League, I mean seriously, how cool is that? There was very good reason to be intrigued. But of course the DC universe has been a bit of a mess to say the least this last decade, and Suicide Squad has been at the eye of that mess when it comes to the films. A leak of the game's UI already put people on edge, but the full gameplay reveal at Sony's State of Play turned the game into an outright laughingstock. Gone was everything fans loved about Arkham, Suicide Squad looked to be basically a reskinned Avengers or Anthem, a video game made by Suits that was bogged down with as many live service gimmicks as possible. It didn't reflect Rocksteady's prior quality nor fans' expectations when Harley Quinn started swinging around the city like Spider-Man with a machine gun. The game has been delayed in response to this backlash, but the issues are so deeply ingrained in players' expectations versus reality that there's surely no saving it. Number 6. Smart Loot and Developer Crunch. Diablo 4. Diablo 4 is finally almost here and certainly looks like it's going to be a blast, but while Blizzard has clearly learned a few lessons from Diablo 3's rough launch, it's far from entirely smooth sailing. For starters, Diablo 4 will be always online just like its predecessor, and Diablo 3's infamous smart loot mechanic will be returning according to a recent beta leak. While smart loot adapts loot to the player's own stats, many feel that it also diminishes the social aspect of trading and the fun of experimenting with different builds. And because that's not enough, late last year a report emerged from the Washington Post that Diablo 4 was being produced under considerable crunch conditions. More than a dozen developers at Blizzard spoke about being grossly overworked to meet the game's June 2nd release date. One developer even said, "We're at the point where they're not willing to delay the game anymore, so we all just have to go along and figure out how much we're willing to hurt ourselves to make sure the game gets released in a good enough state." Beyond that, the report touched on ineffective management at Blizzard and some of the game's questionable storytelling decisions, suggesting that the hugely anticipated sequel might be in rougher shape than the publisher wants to admit. Number 5. The awful character designs. Tekken 8. Fighting game fans are admittedly a fickle and tough to please bunch, but even the most casual of Tekken fans surely turned their nose up at some of 8's redesigns of legendary characters. First and foremost, Namco have absolutely massacred the looks of two beloved fighters. While many of Tekken 8's characters do look pretty great, there's no excusing what they've done to Paul Phoenix and Martial Law. Between his terrible hairstyle and Mad Max cosplay aesthetic, Paul feels like a shadow of his former self, while Law has basically been given a weapons-grade dose of steroids. Considering that Law was conceived as an homage to legendary martial artist Bruce Lee, a man mighty despite his small stature, it seems totally misguided to redesign Law to be an insanely ripped brute. While there's little doubt that Tekken 8's gameplay will be as fluid and addictive as ever, you'll also want to enjoy looking at the characters, right? Well, hopefully the game will at least offer up some decent alternative looks for the duo. Number 4. It's being developed by Bloober Team. Silent Hill 2 Remake. After almost 2 years of persistent rumours, last October Konami finally confirmed that a remake of Silent Hill 2 was in development while releasing an undeniably gorgeous cinematic trailer. But that initial enthusiasm was muted considerably by the revelation that Silent Hill 2 Remake would be developed by Bloober Team, whose back catalogue includes a bevy of wildly divisive horror games such as Layers of Fear, Observer, Blair Witch and The Medium. Though Bloober Team absolutely knows how to craft compelling visuals and an intoxicating atmosphere, their handle on gameplay is considerably less assured. And so, putting them in charge of remaking one of the most beloved survival horror games of all time seems like a dicey prospect. We'd all love to be surprised by Bloober here, but their track record makes it tough to get too excited about what could easily end up being a visually impressive yet otherwise messy retelling of a genre classic. Number 3. It's still not out. Star Citizen. It's admittedly a bit odd to use the word already in the context of Star Citizen, given that the sci-fi epic began pre-production all the way back in 2010, and its crowdfunding campaign celebrated its 10-year anniversary this past September. Over a decade later, Star Citizen has amassed a mind-boggling $500 million, yes, $500 million in crowdfunding, yet the game still remains unreleased. While in-progress slivers of the space trading and combat simulation game have been released to backers, the fact that the game is still incomplete so many years later has naturally caused many to become disillusioned with the project. Some have deemed it a victim of scope creep, that the game simply grew more ambitious as more funding came rolling in, while others have even gone as far as to call Star Citizen a glorified scam. Whether or not Star Citizen does eventually fulfill its lofty promises, there's little blaming those who bought in back when Margaret Thatcher was still alive and are frustrated at having nothing concrete to show for their investment. Number 2. The $70 asking price. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom looks absolutely fantastic, but alongside its release date recently being confirmed for May 12th, Nintendo also revealed that the game would be the first AAA Nintendo product to cost a whopping $70 or 60 quid for us over here in the UK. While Sony began raising their prices to $70 starting with the current gaming generation in 2020, and Microsoft are imminently due to start doing the same, Nintendo held firm with a more competitive price point for their new releases, which, given the comparatively underpowered nature of the Nintendo Switch, absolutely made sense. Especially given the performance issues which many recent Switch games have had due to the aging hardware, and the likelihood that Tears of the Kingdom won't be entirely free of technical compromises. For $70, people understandably expect a basically faultless, silky smooth experience, and so it's tough not to view Nintendo's price uplift as greedy. And number 1, the longest gestating AAA game ever, Beyond Good and Evil 2. After years of speculation, Beyond Good and Evil 2 was first announced by Ubisoft in 2008, after which the publisher went near radio silent on the game for almost an entire decade. At E3 2017, Beyond Good and Evil 2 was finally reintroduced with an extremely impressive, attention-grabbing cinematic trailer, but again, updates became sporadic in the years that followed. Beyond the odd fleck of gameplay, buzz in the industry transformed into skepticism about Ubisoft's ability to deliver on the game's open-world promises, exacerbated by the game's director departing the company in 2020. Initial fan excitement similarly turned to frustration with the drawn-out development and growing concerns for the project either never being released or, worse yet, releasing as a disaster. This was all capped off last October when Beyond Good and Evil 2 became the longest developed AAA game in history, beating out the infamous prior record holder Duke Nukem Forever. At this point in time, most fans of the original game are completely fed up with the sequel's elongated dev cycle, enough that most interest has basically evaporated. And that's the list. Let us know what you thought of this video down in the comments below. Which of these games are you upset about already? And of course, let us know of any others that we didn't include. Make sure you like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Head over to WhatCulture.com for more content every day. I've been Cy for WhatCulture, and have a good week.